Welcome to the Big Kickoff Football Show with myself, Roy Shanahan. Always David Bugle is with me. I'm delighted today to have Keith Hackett, former, I'm going to say Premier League referee, because that's what a lot of people recognise now. But of course, there was football before the Premier League. Keith, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Yeah, I was actually on the Premier League. I was due to retire, funnily enough. I think I had 21 years on the Football League. And when the Premier League was formed, they sort of said, look, would I be prepared to stay on? So I stayed on for a couple of years, which was interesting because you were in at the base level of the Premier League and you had a good idea where it was going.
Yeah. Did that change in those couple of years that you were in the job?
I don't think it did dramatically. I think that what we saw was perhaps the fact that the games were being covered, every game was being covered. So whereas before you'd had 20 odd years fairly peaceful with Match of the Day, and Match of the Day was 20 minutes or more on an evening. So in a sense, not every game was covered. So you would go perhaps 2 or 3 weeks without a game that you were officiating on TV. So it changed. The dynamic of the whole thing changed. And then, of course, I moved on after I'd retired from active refereeing. And there's a story behind that. I then eventually became the development manager because I'd gone to the Premier League and said, look, the game's getting quicker. We're amateurs in a professional game and we needed to train more. And as a consequence of that, put forward a proposal which the Premier League accepted and the FA, and the PGMOL was formed. I mean, in that initial period, they said, look, you've got to now move to London and take over the organisation. I went, absolutely not. I'm not living in London. Not that I don't like London, but the price of houses around there was scary. So I just went, no, I'm staying where I've always been in the city of Sheffield. And then after about 18 months, I'm cutting across, I became the boss of the PGMOL. And that's when we began to see a dynamic change in refereeing. Not that my colleague Philippe Don had not done work, but then I started introducing things which are now standard. The pre-match warm-up, we introduced the communication kits. I just went and watched a rugby match at Twickenham. I'm not a rugby fan, but I went to watch one, listened in, came away that day and said, we've got to have that for English referees. We've got to have that in refereeing. And I went to the Premier League and they said, yeah, we'll fund it. And about 3 weeks later, we had the communication kits with every referee. I mean, those early days were quite scary because at Chelsea, I was watching a game from the director's box and suddenly listened to the referee or watched the referee and suddenly he was almost divorced from the game and he dragged the earpiece out. And at the end of the match, I said, hey, what's gone off? You lost focus. And he goes, yeah, you'd lose focus if you suddenly got a call on the microphone system that says, I want a cab from Kensington High Street. So we then had to think about encryption. And then before I left, I stood up at a conference of the Premier League and said, I want a goal line technology. And, worked on that for about 3 or 4 years to get it to a place where it was, after 18 months, we were okay. We could get the system operating. It would do what we wanted it to do. But then we had the battle with FIFA to introduce it. Wasn't their idea. As a consequence, it became quite difficult.
But right, well, what we might do is we might go back to the beginning because we're after going into a little couple of things and we're going to feed off what you're just after saying there because you're after spawning a couple of questions now already. But first of all, just how did you get into refereeing? Did you play football yourself?
I did. I played local football in the local parks. You know, the county FA had made a suggestion to every club in Sheffield that they should have at least one player who had a reasonable understanding of the laws of the game. And I was the guy that was pushed forward. I spent 6 evenings learning the laws of the game, and passed the examination. It cost nothing to do that. It now costs £146. If you want to think in England, if you want to become a referee, it's going to cost you 146 quid. And then they scream that they don't get people coming in to volunteer to do it. So times change. And I had no intention of refereeing. And then on one Saturday, or should I say on a Friday, before a Saturday with no game, I got a call from the county FA secretary who worked a fast one on me. He sort of came on the phone. I answered it at work, and it was, Mr. Hackett, you're refereeing Hillsborough Boys Club versus Sheffield United Juniors tomorrow at Intake School, kick-off 3 o'clock, phone down. So I couldn't even say I've no intention of refereeing. So then the next few hours was borrowing a referee's shirt, going out and buying a whistle, buying an Ingersoll watch, you know, a pocket watch with a 45-minute, and then walking out onto a school playing field on a Saturday, and clueless. And people say you're clueless throughout your career, but I walked onto that pitch, and I don't know why, but I said to myself, I've been playing a bit, so I knew the game. I looked at the kids in front of me, and I'm thinking, well, I'm pretty confident here. And I went through the game. It went really well. And then this guy came up to me, a guy called Len Swallow, and he just said, well done, ref. That was really a good performance. And how long have you been refereeing? And I said, well, this is my first match. And he kindly wrote a letter to the county FA. And then I was called into the county FA. And at that meeting, encouraged to become a referee. And so I played for the rest of the season. And then the following season really became more active as a referee, doing 100 games a year.
Did you enjoy it?
Absolutely. You know, as a player, if you think about it, there's 22 players on a pitch and there's 90 minutes. So whilst you're running around, but for a referee, it starts before the game, during the game, there's total involvement. And then the challenge is, can you improve? Can you do better than the week before? And from that aspect, you develop your career. And, you know, you start off with teams who are generally accepting what you're doing, and then you start getting players who don't. You've got, you know, I say to everybody, learning the laws of the game is one aspect of refereeing, but in fact, there are many aspects. How to manage an event at the very highest level, how to manage players. And my view was that if I could keep 22 players on, and we all enjoyed it, then that was where I was at. And I would always talk to the players. And, you know, I mean, I was out on Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, Sunday afternoon. You know, when I started in 1960, it was outlawed. You couldn't play Sunday football. But it was quite growing quite quickly in Sheffield, Sunday football. And I can remember refereeing some of those early games where there were no goalposts, there were no markings, and there were, I mean, on one occasion, I played, there were 2 pub teams, and the goalposts were actually barrels, empty barrels of beer. Yeah, because just the enjoyment of refereeing a football match. And what the agreement was, whatever you said, ref, we would respond to it. So, yeah, we might disagree with a decision, but we'd still apply what you've said.
Yeah.
You know, if you say it's a goal, if it's 20 foot high and it's in between those barrels, if you say it's a goal, it's a goal. If you say it's not a goal, it's not a goal. And it was on those levels of understanding that you built up your own reputation and the camaraderie exists. It was never a battle. With some referees, even today, it's a battle between the referee and the player. And they don't understand the players, And I say to young referees, look, this game that we enjoy, we should enjoy, and it's about players. It's not about referees. You're not there to entertain. You're there to facilitate a game that they enjoy.
Yeah. And, isn't the old saying, Keith, isn't the old saying, if the referee isn't talked about and is never mentioned, that means he's after having a good game. And unfortunately, nowadays, they're always talked about.
Yeah, because I think the game's changed. We've got to recognise at the very elite level, the first thing is, if you're at a Premier League game in England, there's a minimum 22 cameras. And against that, you've only got one pair of eyes. You've got colleagues to help. I'm sure we're getting to the debate on VAR, which is a disaster in England, a total and utter disaster. They've made a complete mess of it. The year that they decided we'd not have it in the Premier League, the most iconic league in the world, decide everybody else can have VAR, we're not.
Yeah.
And then when we introduce it, the boss of the PGMOL decides we're going to put those monitors at the side of the pitch because that's what IFAB require us to do. But we're not going to use them. But he couldn't say that. So what he said to the media was, we're going to use those cameras sparingly. He did. 3 times out of 380 games. So the nonsense that we've seen with how the PGMOL in England, of which I used to be the boss, and how it's operated VAR, couldn't be any worse. Yeah. Could not be any worse. And there are all sorts of, it's easy to sit and criticise, but in effect, all we have to do is we have to say, look, FIFA and the IFAB spent 2 years experimenting how they would operate the system. And with a degree of arrogance, along comes the PGMOL and the Premier League and say, we're going to do this different. And that's why they're in a hole.
Yeah.
So from my perspective, we even when I became an international referee in 1981, and I was then 7 years into being a Football League referee, I would still referee in the local parks. So you would see me on a Saturday afternoon at Anfield and on a Sunday morning officiating 2 pub teams. And because I did it for the enjoyment.
Yeah.
So one day I'd be running alongside George Best or Maradona or Dalglish or you name them. But on a Sunday morning, it's Fred Smith. And he's had a couple of pints of beer and he's got a bit of an headache and he's a bit overweight, but he wants enjoyment and so do I. Yeah. And that's my approach.
I think what we'll do is, because I think we're probably all chomping at the bit, we'll come back to your past and we'll stick with the present now, because let's just talk about VAR and obviously the handball, because the handball rule again has changed today.
Yes.
And we'll talk about that now. But are IFAB creating rules that don't need to be placed in? Because at no stage do I remember incidents of handballs where there was multiple occasions where this was destroying the game, that they needed to bring in the rule. The written rule or the unwritten rule was, if it was accidental, it wasn't handball. If it was on purpose, they felt it was on purpose, it was handball. That seemed to be fine as far as I'm seeing. I'm not aware of why they needed to change it. And now they're changing it every year and making it more complicated. And this is what's happening with the referees. The referees are getting it in the neck, but they're making crazy rules and, again, changing it so people can't even keep up with it.
I think that you're absolutely spot on. The whole remit of the laws of the game is to try and keep it simple. And what happened 2 or 3 years ago was they put David Ellery in charge of being the technical director. Now he's a colleague, he's a former Premier League and international referee, and he suddenly becomes the technical director, having been a housemaster at Harrow School. I'm nothing against him individually, but he's a tinkerer. You know, he wants to look at me. I'm here. You know, it's like those VARs at Stockley Park. Nothing's going off, but I've got to come in. So I'm getting paid some money. I've got to come in and do something. I can't go through a game without not doing anything. And he has that room. So, you know, I was quite averse to, or not averse, but quite happy saying it's deliberate. A handball offence has to be deliberate. I can judge whether it's deliberate. I'm paid to do that. We might get the odd referee that disagrees, 1 out of 100 with what I've done, but generally we're in the same boat and we're pulling the same strings and we're making the same decisions. And we know full well that the only people that can handle the ball on the field is the goalkeepers. So that's simple. And if it's deliberate, right, if it's deliberate and he makes himself wider to stop a ball, he's moving his hand out wide and it's deliberate. And so in that sense, what do? They suddenly bring in this accidental handball, which is absolutely absurd. Now, I think behind this was the thought that they still can't get over the fact that Ireland were robbed of going to the World Cup because of Thierry Henry's handball.
You're breaking our hearts again.
Still sore.
Which wasn't seen by the match officials, but was deliberate. Let's make no mistake, that's not accidental. What he did was deliberate. Now, this is why I'm always for technology, because when you've got 22 cameras at a football ground, and the referee's only got 2, and his colleagues got 2 ideally, you're going to miss things. And I can tell you, I've assessed referees over thousands of games. I've looked at footage. And when a referee makes an error, invariably, it's because of the process of a referee. The process of a referee in its decision-making is, first of all, to see, to recognise, to think, and then act. And he does that in milliseconds. But when I've examined those errors, invariably, it's not the incompetence of the referee in terms of decision-making, it's not seen it. So therefore, what you say is you want balance at the elite level, and therefore you do require VAR to operate to help referee. Okay? That's the reason I promote VAR. But sadly, the complication of how they've operated VAR has not helped, because they've taken the decision away from the referee to the man in Stockley Park. Now, getting back to the handball, they were implying last season that a player, this is the beginning of the season, right? That a player could accidentally handle the ball out on the wing, cross the ball, and a centre forward puts it in the back of the net, and they're going to say that goal's ruled out. And I said right from the word go, that is an absolute nonsense. That's not what we want in football. You know, what we want to see is goals. And what we've done is, because allied to the handball is offsides and how we're dealing with that in England. So what they've done this year is they've gone, actually, we agree with that. We agree that this ball from the wing that's accidentally handled should not be disallowed. So they've effectively said, if a player now accidentally handles the ball and scores, right, that's the only one that's going to be pulled as an offence. So, and then you've tried to clarify the body shape and all that goes, and the position of the arm. So, it's a mosaic of a mess. that has come about, making life more difficult for the referees, but not just the referees. They've made them difficult for the players.
And have you talked to any referees about it, Keith? An unnatural position. I find it bizarre to even try and comprehend what an unnatural position is, because it depends on how fast you're running, how quick you're turning, maybe you're sliding, how quick the ball comes at you. What way is an unnatural position? Because I've never, not once in my life, seen a footballer run with his arms down by his side. It just doesn't happen. And for you to be able to stop, to turn, to twist, arms go in different directions. So have they ever clarified what a natural position is?
Well, I did some years ago with referees, and I said that where a player deliberately extends his arm out to prevent the ball from passing, then that's deliberate. If a player puts his hand or arm above his head at a direct free kick near the penalty area and he strikes, he's made himself bigger to prevent the ball passing, that's deliberate, right? What I'm amazed at is that the current people who are running football have failed to bring in the experts. Look, when I wanted the referees to be fitter, to be quicker, I brought in sports science. When fans were saying, "You're blind, ref," I brought in a vision scientist to say, right, I want every referee, I want their peripheral vision, the speed at which they react to things, all measured scientifically, right? And in that sense, I then wanted referees, because footballers do about 50 sprints in a game, average. We were doing as referees 25. So I'm saying we're down on that. And how can I avoid referees not seeing incidents? So I then brought in a running coach, a sprint coach, and said, right, change out my guys to make them quicker. So the likes of Webb, Clattenburg and others, Halsey, were doing up to 14,000 meters per game, 1,000 meters at 7 meters per second. And, you know, if you take a sprint, a dynamic sprint by somebody like Thierry Henry, sorry to mention it, as an example, when he's running with a ball, he's running at a speed of 7 meters per second. So if it takes a referee 3 seconds to respond to that, he's 20 odd meters down.
Yeah.
So with sports science, you bring those things in to actually say, how can you improve the lot of a referee? How can you reduce the exposure? So for me, I think, you know, when you look at the mechanics, there is a science that looks at biomechanics. I know this is like getting deep into it, but if you're dealing with elite sports people, you know, I refereed at the Olympic Games of '88, and I sat with some of the top sports coaches. And I sat with a guy watching the 10,000 meters. And he lived in London, but he coached some of the Kenyan team. And he had a clipboard, and on it, he had, like, let's say 50 seconds, 50 seconds, 50 seconds. And I'd gone, what's those? These are lap times. And then all of a sudden, probably about eight laps down, he's 45. And I've gone, you've made a mistake there, mate. Do you mean 54? Because he's getting a bit tired. And he goes, no, that's when he's going to win the race. And I watched that, and I watched that athlete win the gold medal based on the information that this guy was carrying on the clipboard, the tactics, if you like. So refereeing's no different. How you deal with players. If I said to you, like I see some referees today, come here, what's your immediate reaction? He's belittled. It's belittled, and it's going to go get lost. So it's a simple thing to create a triangle in the mind, and that is, if you're at B and I'm at A, I'm going to say to you, come and meet me at C. I want to have a chat. And then I'm not going to say to that player, by the way, the next time you do this, you're going to get a yellow card or you're going to get a red, and in a threatening manner. I'm just going to say to him, look, you're clearly in my mind's eye. I want an improvement. And that's all myriad, isn't it? Where's he want an improvement? I've left that with the player. I'm not telling him where I want an improvement. He should know. So I think it is that approach, the scientific approach, that's gone a little bit by the wayside. I mean, you've got football teams in the Premier League, believe me, who know the distances, speeds, the recovery rates, and I was doing nothing different. I knew everything about the individual referee. I also knew that, and they knew, that if that number 9 centre forward, whoever he's playing for, keeps missing an open net, he's going to get dropped. The manager's not going to select him. And I had 20-odd referees for 10 games, effectively, and 4 or 5 Football League games. But the outcome was they knew that if they had a poor match, right, they were unlikely to get a game the following week. And I built that into the system. It wasn't fear. It was actually, it was a big palm of one hand in their back to say, I don't want you to make mistakes, man.
It's focus.
Correct. It's absolute focus. And at the moment, it's not just me saying it. Look, I have colleagues who I managed who are top-class referees. You could have read what Jeff Winter used to say. You can read what Mark Halsey says. And we're on the same page. We're all saying, where's refereeing going at the moment in England?
Dave, you wanted to step in?
Yeah, it was just when he was talking about the fitness. Ironically, it was replayed again yesterday, and I was like, I must ask the question tomorrow when obviously Neville and Carragher went to train with the refs there a couple of years back, and they did the fitness sessions, and they struggled, obviously, at the end. And Carragher's like, Jesus, after 60, 70 minutes, we'd be taking off, and it's okay. What happens with you guys? And one of the guys, quick as a flash, and just start giving loads of frees, slow the game down. So, well-respected referee Keith Hackett, did you ever give a load of free kicks in the last 10, 15 minutes to slow the game down?
Well, I think, my brief was that as you get older, you learn to read the game better.
Yeah.
Right? But the truth is that I can remember in my final season, and it was me that made the decision. The Premier League wanted me to carry on for a further year. But I got suddenly a fixture, Manchester United, Liverpool. I said, right, that's my last game.
Mm.
And the reason being is that, the dynamic is that the game was getting quicker then. And when the pass-back rule came in, it increased by 40%. So the answer was that, I see it now. I see referees who suddenly the game's going away from them. They'll blow. They'll find free kicks. John Moss is pretty good at that. Lee Mason was even better. and Mason's off now. But he should have gone 3 years ago. So the answer is that in modern refereeing, the whole aspect was I was an amateur. So, I was an amateur in a professional environment. And so it was down to me how I trained. And I used to train locally on a football field to me here. And I used to go round and round and round and round and run forever because it was endurance. And I always trained knowing that I might do 90 minutes plus. When I got onto the FIFA list in 81, suddenly I was getting some advice occasionally in terms of, hey, have you thought about this? And all that goes. And when, I went to the Premier League and said, look, we need professional referees. I'd lost 2 jobs because of refereeing. And so I'm saying, right, because I needed time off. I was once appointed to a game, Stuttgart versus Feyenoord. And there was a board meeting, and I had to attend that board meeting. And as a result, I had to charter an aircraft at my own cost to bring me back from Germany. You know, it cost me $2,000 to referee a football match. So the important bit was how could we go from being amateur to professional?
And how were they with you, Keith? Was there resistance? Were they encouraged? What way was it?
I think that when a senior referee like myself was saying clearly and highly respected at the time that there needed to be changes, and the dynamic was, one, businesses could afford to have a referee in my era. It was great for their business. It no longer, you know, there was internal jealousies in businesses. So you suddenly needed to say, look, there has to be a more scientific approach to how you deal with refereeing. And if you wanted referees to improve as a group, then you've got to come together on a more regular basis. And so I put the proposal forward that the discussions then, how is it going to be funded and who takes control? Because the ownership of referees, if you like, the license of referees was with the county FA or the Football Association. So basically what happened was there was an agreement where the license, in effect, would be handed over to the Professional Game Match Officials Board, and there would be a board of directors. The Football League, the FA, and the Premier League CEOs were the directors of the business, and Philip Don before me was the general manager. And the three parties would fund that organisation. So to give you an idea, when I left, there was about £5 million being spent on refereeing to pay for their match fees, you know, the gymnasium, the sports science. I had a small team. Now I'm going to shock you if you're not aware. The last set of accounts, 22 million.
For last year?
Yes, for the year before. The last set of accounts. So the whole argument that I put forward was, you know, I put a business plan together when I took over. I reshaped it all and said, right, the business plan is to create a cadre of world-class referees. That's my brief. That's what I would aim to do. And I think in delivering people like Clattenburg, Halsey, Paul, Winter, whoever you like, Durkin and the like, they were there, you know, but they weren't. Webb and Clattenburg were refereeing in local football. And I recognized them and said, right, we're going to bring those through. So we started giving them coaching early. And, you know, they'd sit there and, you know, I can remember sitting opposite Howard Webb and saying, what's your ambition? You know, what's your goals? What's your targets? He said, well, I'm happy. I'm happy to be a Football League referee. I go, I'm not. And he goes, what do you mean? I said, I think you've got the attributes to be the best referee in the world. And I'm going to drive you into that position. And you drive that with fairly straight talking. You know, I can remember coming off a game at Blackburn and watched him referee at Blackburn, and he thought he'd had a wonderful game. And I hit him between the eyes and said, well, were you in control of that match? He goes, yeah, sure. I said, well, I'll tell you, the average fan didn't think so. People sat outside of me didn't think you were in control. You played far too much advantage and you were putting yourself in jail regularly. So let's look at the performance in more detail. We met the following week. We ran through the 90 minutes. But I think that's a natural process of a coach trying to improve the performance of a match official. But you know,
and just on that, Keith, do you listen to, I suppose, pundits? Do you listen to fans? Does that affect you in any way? Or do you just take the good parts that you say, okay, yeah, they're talking a bit of sense here, and push the other stuff aside?
I think that what is important is, I did listen to fans. Let me give you an example. I sat in a building in Liverpool, once part of the stand of Anfield, right, with Liverpool supporters, about 50 or 60 of them. A guy called Les Lawson ran them. I can remember it distinctly, right? And I did this with other clubs as well, and sat there and listened to what he said. And I mean, one guy hit home because I couldn't give him an answer. He's saying, well, you're a referee. You're judging the referee's performance as a referee. You're not judging him as a fan. You're not judging him as a player, as a manager. And that really bit at home with me. I mean, I never get annoyed, but I'm thinking, driving home that evening, I'm thinking, he's got a point. How can I now convince him that we are not policemen policing policemen? Because that's what he was getting at. And so I went to the Premier League and said, right, I want you to select 20 people. I want them to be ex-managers, ex-players, and I want you to pay for them and for them to go to games as a match delegate. And I want them to come in and listen to what the referee's got to say before the start of the game. And I want those delegates to go in after the match and debrief the referee. And I was rather fortunate because Richard Scudamore, the CEO of the Premier League, was in fact himself a former referee, but on the Western League. You know, there were times when he'd come in and he'd be blazing at the hip, and I'd go, well, listen, we're refereeing on the Premier League. You're the CEO. You haven't refereed at this level, so you really don't know what you're talking about. But in reality, he was supportive of what we were doing. And, you know, so that delegate panel was set up. So I had a matrix that said 1 to 20, the marks of assessors and a league, 1 to 20, then the delegate's performance. So I might have a referee who's getting really high mark by assessors because he's technically competent. And they're saying to me he's useless. He's got no man management skills, no interpersonal skills. He's arrogant and he needs a kick up the rear. And so what that did was it gave me a feedback to be able to say to the sports science psychologist that I had working with me, try and knock him into shape. Try and get this acceptance and break down the barriers. And a lot of it is communication. It's how you know, Jeff Winter is a really nice guy and very amusing guy. But one of the managers said to me, he's arrogant. And I'm going, he's given that. And I watched. And I then rang the manager up and said, look, I've watched him. I've been to the game. You've watched him today. Why do you class him as arrogant? I didn't see that in him today. And he goes, didn't you see the way he carried the ball out onto the pitch? He got it in one hand. Why does he do that? Why does he do that? But see, it comes from a different direction, doesn't it? Yeah. Perception.
But
and so I then had to say to Jeff, look, Jeff, you're going to have to carry the ball in a different way, mate. or give it your assistant referee.
But
so I think, and of course, you're dealing with different personalities. You know, you know full well, for example, that somebody like Webb could manage conflict. He was a copper.
Yeah.
You know, in those early days before we went professional, he would referee a football match and then dash home and spend the next 12 hours manning a 12-seater police bus. So he had a great manner with him in dealing with players.
Yeah.
You know, and so we were able to get Howard to chat about that and bring that out in refereeing. So,
but interestingly, Keith, you said the word arrogant, and that's something that fans bring out a lot about like a couple of different referees. And I don't know whether this is what, like, obviously it's interesting what you're saying there about Jeff Winter, but it's kind of like the stereotype of kind of the head is almost turned away and they're just shooing a player away. And I think that's where the word comes from. But when you see stuff like that, is that just, I've made my decision now, leave me? Do you understand why the referee is coming across that way? Or is there a bit of an element of that with some referees, the way we fans like to think they are?
Well, I think that when you get a group of fans and they bring across their views,
yeah,
invariably they're right. And therefore, what you have to do is you then look at body language. You know, I used to benchmark all our referees against Pierluigi Collina, right? And so you learn tricks from him and other referees. And, you know, 23 years at international level and all that, you learn a lot. And you know full well that when you're dealing with Italian, Romanian, French players, they talk with their hands. It looks more aggressive. So you learn to actually use two arms, palm down, and you're going like, calm down, calm down. And sometimes it takes two to make an argument. So you're having a go at me, and I'm gonna actually allow you to have a go at me, and I'm not going to overreact. Sometimes the referees overreact. They almost like I'm taking up the challenge. No, they don't have to be soft. They can deal with that, and they can say, "Have you had your say then? Have you? Fine. I've listened to what you've said. Now listen to what I've got to say." And so I think there's always skill sets and answers that how to respond. You know, I mean, if you look a couple of 3 years ago, I was saying that young Michael Oliver was arrogant. And the reason he was arrogant was, I mean, I'd spoken to this guy, I knew him. He's not arrogant. But he was coming out that he was arrogant in the field. And I think to some degree, that was because he's in the window of exposure. He's only a young guy. And he's looking across players who he sees on television. He's got to deal with them. And sometimes he didn't have the skill sets to actually have the confidence. And you know, when somebody doesn't have that, they start shouting. And therefore, as a result, I'm pleased to I read today UEFA and Roberto Rossetti, the Italian who's in charge of UEFA. And he said to his referees for the upcoming Euros, I want you to be calm. I want you to be calm because it's evident that if a referee is calm, it reduces that amount of attack from the players. And so the answer is body language. And I think sometimes I see a decision and I almost see a referee crowing about the decision, almost like, look at me. I'm absolutely brilliant. Standing there going, it's a penalty kick and I've given it and aren't I clever? And I go, why don't you get your arse out of the way? You've given it and just let the penalty kick go on rather than standing there preening yourself that you've made a big decision.
And when you look, after all, I'm just thinking here, you've talked about how you've built up the professional refereeing era, how you've done everything behind that. Has VAR now broken down a lot of that? Because what we've seen is they've had extra technology now to be able to make better decisions. And yet, even though the rules are messing a lot up, there's a lot of decisions that are blatant, that they are just basically getting wrong, and they're seeing it 4 or 5 times over. So the old saying the referee only gets to see it once is gone out the window, and it's making referees look, people are questioning referees now. Jesus, they are actually as bad as we thought they were. It's nearly like they're giving proof now to the referee's decision making.
Well, first of all, to answer that, and I'm blunt and I say it as it is, right? I think there are at least 5 referees within the 19 that shouldn't be on the list. They're not good enough. You're far better operating with a smaller list than going out every Saturday as a referee. But what we're asking the referees to do at the moment is 1 week be a referee, Friday night, you're referee at Leeds United, right? And then the following day, you're VAR. And maybe on a Wednesday night, your 4th official. Look, I brought in specialist assistant referees. I said, look, assistants are going to be assistants. They're not going to be referees 1 week and all that goes with it. And they're going to be teams of officials. because it's a team job. It's not a one-man role. The two assistants assist the referee, and you want good teamwork, good preparation. And so Howard Webb, when he went to the World Cup, he'd worked with Malarkey and Can, the two assistant referees, for about 4 or 5 years. So they were a team. They were joined at the hip. They almost had a sixth sense. So the principle is that the way they've operated VAR has undermined the referees to begin with, because it's not been operated accurately. But let's not take away the fact that we have some poor referees and they're making bad calls. Now, on my watch, and what we want is advancement, not regression. So in 10 games, if you look back at the statistics, every weekend, you would have one major decision that was wrong on my watch. So you got 10 games, one decision wrong. You might have, by that I mean the key major incidents, the wrong penalty kick, the wrong goal, Manchester United v Tottenham, Mark Clattenburg referee.
Yeah.
Carroll drops the ball a metre over the line, no goal given. I then examined that in fine detail. Where was Clattenburg? Where was the assistant referee? They hadn't got a chance. The game had caught them out. That is when, and that is the evidence I used to stand in front of the owners of the Premier League and say, we want goal line technology. And they gave the go-ahead. So what we've got now is we've got referees who are fit to pass a test, annual test, but I worry about their fitness levels on the field of play. I see them stopping 10 yards short, all technical aspects of why they're getting things wrong. But I do the analysis of performance for 2 or 3 websites, for the Daily Telegraph and TalkSport on 2 on a Monday morning. And I've got too many errors every week in, week out. And I'm going like, oh God, I'm seen as the old referee with a chip on his block, on his shoulder. And I'm not that. I want to be able to say, as I did last week, I thought the referee who did the Champions League final was brilliant. He was outstanding. Why was he outstanding? Because he was fit as a butcher's dog and he could communicate with players. But the ultimate thing was, most of his decisions, the majority, were accurate and correct. What we see is no accountability. We see a referee makes a major error on a Saturday, and then, by the way, he's get a bigger game the following week.
Yeah.
And you go, that can't be good for that referee, because if you don't recognise in refereeing, look, we improve our performance in refereeing, just like we improve our driving by the number of games we get. You can remember sitting in front of the car learning to drive, and you're thinking, which of the 3 pedals do I have to press? And you're getting crunch on the gear lever, and then all of a sudden you get better because you do it more. So what you have to do is, if you don't, you've got to examine every error. You've got to get the balance, but you've got to say, right, why did he not give a penalty kick here?
And do you look at it then and go, okay, Howard Webb will just say, Howard Webb was only refereeing in half of his last games that he's been at. He's done VAR, he's done linesman or lines person, whatever. He should be doing more refereeing in there. I mean, if you're in there all the time, like a footballer, if a footballer's being dropped all the time, he's not going to get that up the pace sharpness that he needs.
Well, I think there are many things wrong with VAR. Let's try and examine a few. The first one, we can talk about the laws of the game. We know that handball is okay. Let's see if the change improves it. I never think that an accidental handball should be penalised. It's against all my thinking. Mm-hmm. In offsides, I'm dead straight. The lines are an absolute nonsense. They're kidding us. They're kidding me as a referee, a former referee. They're kidding me as a fan, right? and they're thinking I'm an idiot, and I'm not.
Do you know why that was brought in? Because again, it was another rule that we don't know why it was felt that there was a need for it. At one stage, we had go with the attacker. The attacking player has the advantage. And out of nowhere again, they brought it back to a defensive line, which made no sense, and it didn't look like it was needed.
Yeah, I mean, what they've done is that all of a sudden they've got a bit of technology, and I spent hours and hours working with Hawkeye on goal line technology. And what I did was, and what we did as an organization was to say, right, it's got to meet this criteria. And I would sit there and say to the Hawkeye guy, Dr. Paul Hawkins, would come in and go, Paul, I have to tell you, it's not quick enough. I ain't got the time to stand around and wait. You've got to be quicker. As a result, we moved from camera speeds of 250 frames per second to 500 frames per second. We moved from 3 cameras to 7 cameras around each goal, right? Because I wanted it instantly. And I also said, I don't want human beings involved. I'll allow the human being to check the system before the game commences, because it's a piece of technology. And that's what we achieve. Now, it's simple to me. If you take the current, I think we're going to see some changes in the coming months, right? If you take, first of all, the technology that's being used on goal line technology, on offside, it's operating at 50 frames per second. 500 on goal line technology, 50, right? On goal line, you're looking at one element, the ball moving across the line and the whole of the ball passing the line. On offsides, you've got the release of the ball, and the player in an offside position is not committing an offence until he's become active. So it's a more complex law. And we operated, Philip Donner, who was the PGMOL boss before me, the first one, was quite clear. He said, I'm going to operate where there's daylight between forward and defender. And then FIFA objected to that. But it worked. And now you've got Arsene Wenger quite rightly coming in and saying, first of all, the technology's got to improve. And I think they're doing that as we speak, right? But then what we're going to do is we're going to tweak the law. So we're going to tweak it that the majority of the body of the attacking player has to be offside before it's called. Let me tell you, the toe or the heel offside is an absolute joke. It's a joke. And I've seen brilliant goals being ruled out when we all expect them to be allowed. What the Dutch did was they saw the flaw quicker than the English FA, who were the PGMOL, reluctant to change. We're doing it our way. We don't want to change. What the Dutch did was we said, right, we'll overcome this. We'll make the lines wider. And when they merge, it ain't offside. And so they've not had the problems. But in Europe, the rest of Europe, they don't have the problems with offside that we have because they play invariably with a deep sweeper. And we tend to push out. So it is very much on our side. But, I just worry where the FA are in this, because remember that IFAB were the lawmakers of FIFA, 4 votes, England, Scotland, Ireland, and Wales. Germany, Spain, and all that, they have to rely on FIFA putting it across. So when we get into the crossroads of having a system where nobody admits, they stand there and say it's okay, when we as fans, no, it's a nonsense. Yeah. And it is a nonsense. And the reason nobody's admitted it yet, have they? But what they are doing is changing the technology as we speak, and they will change the law.
Yeah.
And so
I think, unfortunately, Keith, they're changing it far too much, which is, making a mockery of the game altogether and interrupting the enjoyment that we've had. Dave, you want to pop a question in?
Yeah, it was just obviously you mentioned the Dutch there and the offsides, and you mentioned Kalina and what have you. And obviously the 5 votes to 4 is is there a bit of a rivalry between varying nations and referees, or is it very much an open door and everyone bounces ideas off each other, or is there that hierarchy feel from kind of the five here at home compared to the rest of the world?
I think there's resentment against the English FA, and I think that comes through quite strongly. But in fairness to the FA and in fairness to the Premier League, there's a lot of work goes on to try and ensure that there's good links and good communication. Refereeing is competitive. You want to be better than the next man. If I'm standing on a golf tee, and I'm an awful golfer, but if I'm standing on, I want to beat the guy I'm playing. And refereeing is the same. If it's not, you really haven't got the real zest. You know, that ladder that's there and all the pitfalls that exist. You know, I spent 12 years in apprenticeship. I was 12 years refereeing grassroots football in England before I got to the Football League. So I served a long apprenticeship. And to some degree, within that, you gain a lot of experience. You know, guys tell you immediately, when you're walking off the pitch, local grassroots football, they tell you, you know, sometimes they'll come in and go, you know, 7 and 6 match fee. Well, you haven't earned that, mate. You know? and I think that all those things that are the matrix. Now, for me, I think that it is competitive and you're only as good as your next game. And I think that's where the honesty has to come in, where you have to, when you're coaching referees and debriefing a referee, you've got to be absolutely honest with that individual. You've got to say, look, I don't like this aspect of your game. Let's think about how we can improve that. If we're looking at body language, you know, what does a smile do at the right time? What does a frown do at the right time? And what does a word, you know? I mean, I had, you know, some of the players, I can remember Emily Hughes at my first game at Anfield, and I've awarded a free kick against Liverpool. And Emily Hughes has a real go at me. And he was on one. And I'm 7 or 8 minutes into this game. So, because I didn't know the triangle system and all that, I go, come and join me. And he goes, I said, look, quieten down, calm down. Calm down? I said, listen, I've got to tell you, if you don't calm down, I'm going to get to know who you are. Goes, what do you mean? I said, right. And he then came out with a few expletives. And I've gone, right, I'm not putting up with that. Right, what's your name? And he goes, what? I go, what's your name? Do you ever watch television? I go, yeah, I watch it regularly. He goes, well, what about the sports programme? And I go, yeah. I watched that with Sue Barker. Yeah. He goes, well, I'm the England captain. This is, by the way, in the middle of Anfield in a big game. And he goes, I go, yeah, what's your name? My name. I go, right, H-E-M, and the look on his face, L-I-N-G, Emling. That's it. It's Emling. It's Emling Hughes. And I go, that's all I wanted you to say to me. and then we became mates. Daft as it sounds, you know, he played local football in Sheffield, believe it or not. When he retired from football, he played local. He played a lot of charity matches. And a few days before he passed away, sadly, with his brain tumour, I got a call from someone and said, look, he'd like to join you. Would you join him at Bramall Lane? So we watched the match at Bramall Lane, and right through the 90 minutes, he was having the massive go at the referee. It was referee's useless. He's just like you. He's just like you. and so you built those scenarios. But you know, you can learn from other people. I did a program in Portugal a few weeks ago, and on that program was Nigel Owens, the famous rugby union referee. He'd done his 100th international match, announced his retirement. And he was asked about, we were talking about the guy in the stand making the decisions, the big screen and all that. Because I'm saying we need the big screen. We need the fans to listen in. We need everything that rugby are doing because it's better than what we are doing in football. That's what we need. And he then said, but he was asked a question about English VAR, and I thought he answered it brilliantly, because he said, look, I liken it to what we did with the TMO. Think about a tightrope walker, and he's got no net. He's totally focused. He don't want to fall off, because if he knows he does, he's dead. So he's focused, and he's got to watch every step that he's taking. Turn it on its head and say, right, you're putting a safety net there. The tightrope walker becomes blasé, and that's what happens to referees, and that's what has happened to English refereeing. They've lost the focus and the concentration. Some of them have lost the focus and concentration. As I say, some of them. I mean, I've studied the movement and positioning of referees for years and made the adjustments. But the basics are the same. It used to be corner flag to corner flag. Now you look at corner of the penalty area to the opposite corner of the penalty area. And I watch John Moss, and I can't understand where he's running. And I watch him make the odd mistake. He's a good man manager. He talks to the players. They get on quite well with him. But you suddenly say a good coach can make him a better referee, because somebody needs to sit down with him and say, look, where are you running? You're inefficient. You know? And this is why I think that, think about the VAR. And this is like me. Let's take golf as an analogy. And I'm the club golfer. And I'm telling Rory McIlroy how to play the game. And what you've got in the VAR is sometimes you've got the opposite. You've got the referee, the most experienced referee like Oliver, out in the middle, and he's got a VAR who is just been appointed to the list this season. So there's a reluctance from the guy at Stockley Park to actually say, Michael, you've got that one wrong, mate. Mm. And therefore, as a result, the VAR doesn't come in. Mm. And then you've got the guy like Mike D who says, whatever you tell me, I'm going to go with you because you're going to carry the can. It's not me. It's not me. It's him at Stockley Park, mate. I've just got to follow. Mm. When I'm saying, if you look at the MLS last season, operating VAR, and they're longer into it, 1 in every 3 games it was used. It was there, it operated, but it only came in once in every 3 games. That's a fact, I'm telling you. Greg Barkey, who runs it, informed me. So the starting point says, you're the referee, you're in control, you're the one that's judged, you're the one that carries the can, you're accountable. The VAR is there to assist you. You make the decision. Interestingly, they're coming fewer times, and every time they do come in, the referee has to go to the screen because he takes ownership of the decision. We're not doing that.
No, we've let them take over the decisions instead of, as you said, a guidance to, we'll talk about Henri. There's something you should look at, and you make the decision on it. So, and that should be simple. And there should only be 1 or 2 of those in a game, if ever 1 or 2, you know, so that there shouldn't be many of them in the game. So it's only a guide.
But if I'm the referee, I'm the referee. Yeah. I don't want to be reading the paper the following morning that an error's been made because my mate in Stockley Park told me, and he's informed me incorrectly.
Yeah. Okay. So, on the you were talking about, you know, listening in to the communications to each other. Should the communication between referee and VAR be allowed to be heard on the television?
Absolutely. I think that the VAR, we're not there, by the way. FIFA and UEFA are not there. They'll move eventually. But the reality is that when you look at something that is transparent, and we're all looking, the first thing that upsets us about VAR when we're in the stadium is we don't know. We paid 45 quid to watch a football match, and we're the ones that don't know what's happening. We get a notice on a piece of screen that says VAR, but it don't tell us what for. So we don't celebrate a goal. It's common sense, isn't it? It really is common sense. So I'm not being entertained. It's like somebody on the middle of the stage, whoever it is, suddenly comes on and says, well, just a minute. Somebody's talking to me. You'll have to wait for me. I've stopped the song in the middle of it. And you sit there in the audience and then you think, pass us a drink, or I'll have the popcorn and all that goes with it. You've lost focus. And the momentum of the game or the momentum of the song's gone. And then the guy says, oh, we'll start again. And we're all going, what's that then? And if we look at it, if we don't have that stoppage, or we have the VAR as part of the process, right? The time that we all get worried about that it takes to make the right call, right, is not a problem. Because what we do is we show you in the stadium and you on television that the clock is stopped. So that brings in another piece of delicate change I would make, and that is take the timing off the referee, because he's pretty awful at it at the moment, and give it to an independent timekeeper.
The problem is how many times they stop it, isn't it? I mean, if the game starts getting stop-started, then that's going to really interrupt the game sort of flow as well.
This is about the key decisions. This is about clear and obvious errors. It's when you say there's an error, I say there's an error. It ain't, let's search out why we should rule out this goal. Let's search out why we should give a red card, right? If you're taking seconds to make that choice and you're taking, 2 or 3 looks at it, forget it. Okay.
Just want to move on, Keith, because I just want to get through a few things before we finish up. My dad will shoot me if I don't ask you this question. Diving, people feigning injury, like they might have got caught, but they're rolling around the ground. It seems to be encouraged because the laws have not stamped it out. People pretending to get headbutted, nothing ever happens to them. They get away scot-free with it. Maybe the other person gets sent off. His red cards get rescinded if there's nothing there, but nothing ever happens. Is that ever discussed? Has it ever been discussed? And why has nothing ever been done with it?
It has been discussed. FIFA have this view that you don't want to re-referee the game, right? They want the referee to make the decisions, but that falls apart with VAR. In its sense. Some years ago, I said that the biggest problem that we face as referees was in 2 areas: grappling inside the penalty area, right, and blocking, which was literally introduced into our game by Jose Mourinho when he was boss of Chelsea. And then the second point is acts of simulation. Some of it down to weak refereeing. Let me give you an example. A few weeks ago, less than 2 or 3 weeks ago, Bamford of Leeds United was fouled inside the penalty area, kept on his feet, was not awarded the penalty kick. Somebody asked me the question, and I said, well, if I was coaching Bamford, I would tell him to do what everybody else does, go down. So that's the starting point. The weak referee not seeing it and giving the penalty kick because he's saying, I'm only going to give it when he's on the ground. Now, retrospective punishment for me on acts of simulation, diving, are an absolute must, because the players are so good at it I watched Jack Grealish today. He was shot 2 or 3 times in the England game. And I see others. He's not alone. There are a number of them who are serial offenders. And then what they do is they put pressure on others. And so look, for refereeing, it's not easy. You get one chance. VAR ought to be able to come in and resolve it. Often it doesn't. So what it might need is more time. And it's elements about training. It's improving the technique of referees to judge it. And that might be to bring in a biomechanics specialist, that sees body shape, sees reaction, and sees how players go down. But ultimately, we've got to get through to managers and players that they need to be honest, because they're so good at it. It's difficult. Even I, at times, and other referees I speak to need a couple of views, because they will manufacture contact. They'll put out the hook. They'll hook with the leg when they go past. And, immediately the forward gets in front of a defender inside the penalty area, they're going to go down. And invariably, they're going to get the penalty kick. That's what happened this afternoon. The player's gone in front. There's minimal contact. He's gone down like a sack of spuds, as we say, and he's got the penalty kick. That the game is being tarnished with players cheating, but that's always been the case. I mean, look, players have always cheated. They don't like the word, but they have to gain an unfair advantage, and therefore the old basis of it is that the lawmakers and those that apply the laws, the referees, have got to get better.
Yeah, but there was remember the famous one with Rivaldo in the corner, and the ball was kicked over to the side of him, and he held his face and he was rolling around. Now, I don't remember Rivaldo, getting punished greatly for that, which he should have. And it's happening all the time. Someone's walking over. I actually think there was a referee not too long ago. Was it in Scotland that they said they headbutted a player but he went up close to his face? He probably got a little bit sick of what the player was saying to him, but he got grief for it. There's a lot of players who are going around holding their faces. For me, if it was me and I was on a board of referees and I was looking at it, there is retrospective action all the time. I'd be saying, listen, that's simulation. I hate using simulation because it's a made-up word to try and not offend someone, to let them know you're cheating in the game. And that's what they're doing. So they need to be punished.
I don't disagree. I think, I brought clarity. I think with the laws of the game, when you actually put the laws into practice, you've got to clarify. And then what you've got to do is communicate. So I said very clearly, if a player puts his hand in the neck and face, right, it's an instant red card. And there was uproar. And I said, the reason I say that is dead simple. A footballer, it's called football in England, FOOT, they play with a feet. Other than the goalkeeper, they play with a feet. They have no right to put their hands in the face of an opponent. And we brought that in, and that had an immediate effect, because what I did was I saw every manager in the Premier League and the Football League, and said, this is what we're going to do. And they went back and said to their players, keep your hands down, don't get involved. So I think that a lot of this is working with the managers, working with coaches to try to improve the principles of fair play in sport. And it does go down to a watching brief by the Football Association to say, right, I'm seeing that player, he's cheated. It's very clear that he's cheated. Therefore, retrospective suspension.
Do referees be heard? When you have a referee come back and say something like that, when they get frustrated about certain decisions that happen in a game, are they listened to, or are they just told to do their job And is there a reluctance from the likes of maybe IFAB to make decisions mid-seasons and stuff like that, that it's going to, we're just going to do it at the end of the season or review it at the end of the season? And it seems to take 2 or 3 years before that gets done anyhow. It just seems to be a very, very slow process.
I think the IFAB have improved in timings, in fairness. I think that, there's that reluctance. Forgive me, I've got interference here. Let me get that out of the way. I don't know why it's doing that. Bear with me.
You're grand this end.
Sure wish to stop the scan, yes. No, it's all right. I've just got interference on my computer. All right. I do apologise. I've just got this. Yeah. Okay. I think that the IFAB have got better and at making certain amendments to respond to the game. But I think they could be better in terms of lines of communication. I can remember saying there's things that they need to resolve now. Look, let's look at the pulling and tugging and grappling that takes place in the penalty area and the nonsense we see of a referee going in and saying, da-da-da-da-da, I'm not having it. And then immediately he walks away, they're still at it. Just give a few penalty kicks. Just give a few free kicks. Stop it.
They did that at the start of one season and then stopped.
Clampdowns only last 6 weeks. It's a fight, and then they forget. But I do think that there are elements where you can improve the working relationship on the field of play through education, through actually saying, look, the manager will say, if you want to fix simulation, you need to get your referees recognising what's a penalty kick. I stood in front of the likes of Ferguson, Benitez and all those guys and said, right, guys, there's one area that's troubling me. And there's one area that I can guarantee you we're going to get wrong. Can you imagine the reaction I got? And I went, right, okay, you've had your say. Now I'm going to tell you. And that is 1 week you're going to get a penalty and the next week you're not. Because players are going down cheating. And I'll use this word in front of you. I'll not use it in the public domain. I'll apply simulation. So don't come running to me with your complaints that you've had a poor penalty kick given for what you consider to be a dive, because I will give you 2 answers to where you got penalty kicks given for similar incidents. So it's down to you. You get your house in order and I'll try and get mine in order. But the only way we're going to resolve it is through retrospective punishment. And I still believe that. We're not doing it.
Okay, I'm going to, because we've got about 10 minutes left, we'll put on this. Go back in time again to some of your, I suppose, highlights. One of the FA Cup finals, my all-time FA Cup final favourites, was the 81, which you refereed. I had the video at home. I don't support Manchester City or Spurs, but I loved that game, and I loved the 2 games were really, really good. And when I look back at it, some of the tackles that went in were hard, fair. It was just perfect football for me. I just think it was brilliant. But you were in that game. You got to see Ricky Villa's goal, I suppose, close up. What was that goal like close up? What was the buzz, the energy around it? And do you get a little carried away when you see a goal like that?
I'm a fan. I mean, the great thing about refereeing is you're sharing the same field with some of the world's best players. And you've got the best seat in the house. The thing I remember most about the cup final is how we have to recognise as fans that 1 week we're elated and the next week we're flat on our backside because we've not got the win or the player's not done what you expect to do. In a way, I saw that in the two games. That first game, the draw 1-1, was Ricky Villa being substituted. And remember, these were the first overseas players in our game. Mm-hmm. And Villa was totally dejected. And I can remember refereeing the match and looking at this player walking around the perimeter, because the entrance to Wembley then was at one end. And he's walking around and taking that walk of shame. And I thought, I wouldn't wish that on anybody. And then, I'd seen Tommy Hutchinson score a couple of goals, and the whistle went. The game passed so quickly, that first game. And of course, I then have to walk up the steps, be greeted by the Queen Mother. And as I'm walking up the steps, I'm thinking, I wonder if I've got the replay. Because I didn't know, I was asked before the kickoff, right, Mr. Hackett, you've got a choice. You've got a fee of £35 or a gold medal. Which is your choice? So I'm walking up the steps and thinking, if the Queen Mother gives me the medal, that's the end for me. So I'm not going to get a result. And she didn't. And therefore, there's a big beam as I come out of it and down the steps to be told I got the replay. So we now go back to Ricky Villa and we go back to football because, it's a piece of magic, really. It's a weaving run that I could have blown up for a foul. The game is high energy. It was massive. Midweek games on the floodlights are much better than the normal Saturday afternoon, although I'm a traditionalist, 3 o'clock kickoff. And it was just, the atmosphere was electric right the way through. Early on, somebody said to me, look, you allowed a lot in the first game. I go, listen, they only get the chance to win a medal and they're warriors, and therefore I'm going to allow a bit. Did anybody go to hospital? Was anybody murdered? No. Was there honest integrity from the players? Yeah. There was no ducking and diving. So I said, I'm going to allow the freedom for the game to breathe. I want the fans to have the money, value for money. And very early on, Ardiles was the playmaker for Tottenham. And Jerry Gow was the hatchet man for Man City. And Gow's put in a few, and I've had words with him. First game. Now I'm sort of gone straight in. He's carded straight away because I've said, look, not putting up with you this game. I want a fair game. I want 22 players off. I don't want them injured. So in a way, that whole atmosphere was electric, and that weaving run and the goal was just like magic. And I got the medal. I came off. Everybody was happy. But there were some nice touches, that John Bond was the manager of Manchester City. He was on the losing team. And he got off his bench and walked to me and shook my hand and said, well done, ref. And I thought that was magnanimous for a guy who's lost the FA Cup final to say that. And so everybody around me was elated. And of course, I knew at that point that I'd never get a cup final again because that was the tradition. Okay, because of COVID, the last 2 seasons it's changed. But I thought about some of my mates who'd been referees who had not had the cup final. Harold Hackney Barnsley, who was a real down-to-earth pit deputy who refereed for a number of years on the Football League, never got to the cup final. So I was representing them as well. Yeah. So it was a great feeling.
And you got a League Cup final in as well. I remember that game well against Oxford. But the European Championships, you made it to the European Championships, 1988. We remember that one for Ireland because it was our first ever major championships that we were at. What way do you get together, I suppose, referees and all? I know it's a little bit more professional, if you want to call it that now. As you said, they have more time now to gather together, to talk together, to communicate together. How was it back then? And do you feel that, I suppose from an Irish question, did you feel the Irish presence there? And the second question was, obviously England didn't do so great. So do you hear all that at the time when you're over there? or is it when you come back and you feel it?
Well, the big difference now to then is that now you go. I mean, the build up to the Euros was that one, you're given the appointment. You're refereeing West Germany, Italy. It's the opening game. You inform that. Your two assistants, by the way, were referees. Neil Midgley and Brian Hill. They're international referees, so they weren't linesmen in that sense. They were assistant referees. So you spend 3 games refereeing in Football League with them as your linesman, then relearning their craft. And then you fly in, and it's 4 days. So you're in. The following day, you're examining the pitch and doing various things, told about the event and the build-up and all. You're going to meet Chancellor Cole and all that goes with it. You referee the football match. You have dinner. Following morning, you have breakfast and you're home. That's it. And the chance of having another game in the championships is literally gone. So again, that's the difference. When I went to the Olympic Games in the same year, you were there in Korea for the full, well, a week before the Olympic Games and right to the end because I did the semi-final. But great build-up. But this is when you learn as a referee that you're dealing with an event. And I learned that in 81 because in 1981, when I first became FIFA referee, I was invited to be a guest referee on the North American Soccer League. And so I went to America and refereed 30 games in about 8 weeks. One day you'd be in Vancouver and a couple of days later you'd be in Tulsa or Florida and all that goes with it. And you learn to be part of the event. And so the understanding that people don't appreciate that, the reason why there's a guy standing on the side of a pitch in a Premier League game, giving you a countdown and saying to the referee, who are all standing around like players, and you're saying on television, why don't you get the game underway? You're waiting for the check that they do for the 45 television companies that are beaming around the world. So it has to kick off on time. You kicked off a minute early and they scored. And somebody in, Asia saying, oh, by the way, sorry, it's 1-0. You've come in late. Then you're in trouble. So it becomes a big event. And, there were 2 things that I remember about that game. I mean, one, there was an horrendous challenge that I missed behind my back, the assistant referee, and I almost had to separate the 2 assistants, Neil Midgley and Brian Hill, at half time because Neil's having a go at Brian saying, why didn't you flag for that challenge? Keith should have been aware of it. And I'm going, what challenge is that? And then, of course, we had the 4-step rule that had been brought in prior to the competition. So Walter Zenga, the Italian goalkeeper, had infringed in the first half a couple of times. 5 steps, 6 steps. And I've gone, there's a problem. There's a growing problem here. So I called for the Italian coach and the match delegate, who was then UEFA. I asked UEFA, I said, look, I need to speak to the 2 coaches. And I brought the coaches together at half time. And I said, look, I want to remind you that the goalkeeper can only take 4 steps. This is a new law. And I've been asked very clearly by UEFA to apply it. And so there are those things that are added pressure to refereeing. But I mean, no different to refereeing a game. I got a call to say I'd been appointed to referee Gdansk in Juventus. This was the height of the uprising, the shipyard gates and all that were coming, and that the morning of the match, I met Lech Walesa, who was then to become the president. And I asked him, was he going to the football match? He told me he was a big fan of Gdansk. And the answer was smile, because this was a bit of a clandestine meeting. And during the course of that match, I can tell you that the ball went over into the crowd and the crowd parted and there was Lech Walesa. and the entire crowd erupted into shouting solidarity. As a referee, you just stand there, arms crossed, trying to be neutral and wait for the ball coming back and remaining calm and cool. The last one of the last games I had was an East German team and a West German team on unification night, refereeing the match, and then driving and watching people standing on the wall, knocking the wall down. Whereas earlier in my career, I'd refereed East Germany against Switzerland in a Euro Championship game, and I had to walk across Checkpoint Charlie on my own because the assistants were coming from another country. And the guy greeted me at the other end. It was quite eerie, and the guy said to me, "Amazing football, amazing that a few years ago, Mr. Hackett, the President of the United States made a very famous speech in West Berlin, and he couldn't come into the East, and you've just walked across with your bag to referee a football match. Football opens up doors." And so there are these things that remember that are bigger than football.
Yeah. James Smith, we know him. He's a referee. Amazing lads. This is why I ref. Speaks the truth, and a lot of referees need to have their social skills looked at here in Ireland. Too many arrogant ones in the game. We would find that from playing, you can find good. The best referee I ever had was at one of the lower leagues when I was playing over 35s. And the reason why he was so good, I played football in League of Ireland in Ireland, so at a decent enough level, all the way down to 35s, just trying to keep hanging, don't hang up the boots. But the referee I played, and he was over 35 referee, and the reason he was so good was because he complimented you on every opportunity he could. Fantastic pass, and he wouldn't just do it with you; he'd do it with someone else, and he'd remember your name, and it was little things like that. And then when he turned around and he give a decision, say, "Listen, that's just the way I seen it," and you'll go, "Okay, ref." And it was just he guided you. He kind of made sure that you were always going to be on his side, even when the tough decisions came around. And I just found that fantastic with him. I can't remember his name, and I'm doing him a disservice here. That's the referees need to learn how to be a people person.
Yeah, I think that it's a lifestyle skill, isn't it, that you develop? But I've been privileged. I always felt privileged to be allowed onto a football field to work with professional footballers. But I also, I can remember sitting in a wooden hut with 22 players on a Sunday morning, lacing my boots up, and the guys saying, "Saw you on television last week." Yeah. Well, talk to me about the game. And I used to go, "Well, actually, I'm focusing on this one at the moment because this is the most important game." And they used to think, "What?" And I used to go, "Right, this is it." And occasionally they'd say, "Come on, ref, it's not the cup final." I go, "It is for me." And he goes, "Why?" I said, "Look, I've got a standard. I'm getting paid. You're not. I'm getting paid, whether it's 10 bob or a pound, whatever it was, the match fee, I'm getting paid. So I have a job to do." In the same way that, if I said to a player, "Look, you've got to behave more," I'd expect them to behave. So they knew equally I was tough. But from one game to the next, I tried to be consistent. And I think referees do build the reputation. Yeah. And, I look back now and talk to players. There's a big shopping centre called Meadowhall in Sheffield. I go down occasionally, and they'll come up to me and chat and say, "Do you remember that game at so-and-so?" And often I can't remember them as individuals because we've all grown old together. But in reality, I can remember a lot of the things that happen in games. So as a consequence, you build a relationship. One of the great things that I do every year, I get invited. The Sunday team invites me to their annual gathering. And it's quite amazing, really, because we've all grown old together, but we all remember those days without the goalposts. And they will remember more of what I did than what I can remember. But likewise, I can remember their skill set, and I mean, they pulled my leg a couple of years ago, and they reminded me. There's a place in Sheffield called Concord Park. It's got 26 pitches, right? And I have to tell you that every on a Saturday and Sunday, every pitch was occupied. There were teams. And initially, we used to get it changed in a place called the Decontam. It was a building built for the war. It had no lighting. So you knew in wintertime that you needed to, it was a 2 o'clock kickoff. And you knew that you were going to play 40 minutes each way rather than 45. So you came off and there was a little bit of light left for you to get changed. First of all, to find where your clothing was. And so, you'd sit in the Decontam, and I can remember one Sunday morning, sat in this new building that they built, this sports centre in the same Concord Park. And, there's 26 referees all batting with each other, and one saying, I see you had Spain against so-and-so. Yeah, and all that. And you try not to be, you've got to be very careful because they could see you as being arrogant, And so I was very careful, and I go, I'm really looking forward to this match today. And I remember this occasion when the guy came in, and he goes, "Hey, Keith Hackett, yeah. Oh, good to have you, Keith. Here's the match ball. Test it. We're on pitch 1. You know where that is? Yeah, I know where pitch 1 is. Straight out the training camp and onto the pitch. That's pitch 1. And I'm a timekeeper, so I'm out on the pitch, blow the captains together, start refereeing. We're 20 minutes into the game, and there's a referee stood on the side of the pitch with a flag and the ball under his thing. And I've gone, clearly his match is off, or the teams haven't turned up. So I walk across to him, 20 minutes into the match, and I've walked across to him. I said, fancy running me a line, making my life a bit easy. And he goes, what do you mean? I said, well, run us a line. He goes, Keith, you're on the wrong pitch. I go, no, this is pitch 1. And he goes, no, it's not. They've changed the numbers. They've changed the pitch numbers. So I always remember walking off that pitch and getting back into the dressing room and having the hell locked out of me by the 25 referees saying, you can't get even the pitch right, Keith. So those sort of things you remember, getting onto the pitch. But yeah.
You're at a loser there. Listen, Dave, have you any questions to finish off?
Not particularly, everything's been covered at this stage, and it's just, I think it's more of a summarization, and exactly like what Keith is saying is what we want to see as fans is to know exactly what's going on all the time, and exactly like what he said, to hear there's a lot of decisions that are right on the line, and I'd like to know why the ref has made that call, because we can easily have a bias to the team that we're watching, and that's what I'd like to see. And obviously, to hear you saying it is one thing, and now to hear the majority say that now and see that improve as the years go on, it'd be great to see. But it's been a pleasure having you on, and more of the same.
No, I'm not going to finish just yet because I have a couple of quick fire questions just to finish it off. You've been refereeing a lot of players, so give us a few. What players were the funniest? Who's the funniest player that you ever had to ref?
I think that was Stan Bowles. I'll tell you a story. I was refereeing a cup game, and it was Wolverhampton Wanderers versus Queen's Park Rangers. He played for Queen's Park Rangers. Yeah. And at the time, the England player, Tony Curry, played. And we're probably 30, 40 minutes into the game when Tommy Docherty, who was the manager of Queen's Park Rangers then, comes to the touchline and signals that they're going to make a substitution. And we didn't have the boards. They didn't have numbers and boards. So I get the shout that it's Stan Bowles that's going to come off. So everybody's heard it, and Stan Bowles is moving in the direction opposite to where he's expected to leave the field of play. And I go across to Stan and say, Stan, you've been subbed. And with a few expletives, he goes, I'm not. Get out of here. And I go, listen, Stan, you're being subbed. And he wasn't going to go. He clearly wasn't going to go. And I've gone, cracky, this is a challenge. So I go to Tony Curry. I said, Tony, Stan's being subbed. Can you help me get him off? Absolutely not. You're on your own, mate. So I've then gone to Stan Bowles and I've gone, Stan, do you get paid the same for playing 30, 40 minutes as playing for 90? And he goes, yeah, and ran off. So I always found that funny. Vinnie Jones was funny. He'd always have a quip. So I think there are lots of players who I can remember refereeing Manchester United against, I forgot who it was. I think it might have been Arsenal. And there's a debate going on. And Joe Jordan had this thing of catching the ball. You know, his arms were down straight and the ball would hit his arms and he'd gain control. It was handball. So I'd blown him very early on in the game. I'd blown him for handball, right? And he's gone at me like the Scottish guy he was. He was very unhappy. So I run alongside him. I didn't want to, so early on, I didn't want confrontation. So I run alongside him and said, look, calm down, calm down. It's one decision. I'm going to make some more. And he wouldn't let it go. And he comes back at me again. So I blow the whistle, stop the game. He stood at the side of me and said, right, let me tell you this, Joe. I'll be dead honest with you. You're banned from Cinderella's nightclub in London as of now. And he looked at me gobsmacked. And his mate, remember Gordon McQueen and him had been signed from Leeds United. And Gordon McQueen comes across and says, what's the problem? I go, I've just told him he's banned from Cinderella's nightclub. He's gone, what are you on about? I said, well, what am I called? Keith Hackett. And he goes, yeah. I said, well, my brother John is a director of Stringfellas nightclub and he's also a director of Cinderella's Rockefellers in Leeds. And he goes, oh, you're kidding. And that killed it. I mean, then there was no arguing from Joe. And so we smile about that. Occasionally when I meet these guys, that's the subject that comes up, you know. I think it's using the craft on the football field. So, yeah.
Okay, who's the hardest one to ref?
I thought the hardest one was Laurie Sanchez of Wimbledon. And everybody says, you're kidding me. Vinnie Jones, Dennis Wise would do it openly. You know? Horton, Luton was the same. Do it openly. On his cloggers at times. And easy to deal with. Sanchez was like, they tell me, Johnny Giles. Yeah. Johnny Giles was sly and would do it on out of the eye of the referee and stir it up a bit. So, these people have a brain, don't get me wrong. They know when to do it. And they're the ones that know when to do it, which is outside your sight line, and they're clever with it. And it's only when you review a video afterwards that you see, just a minute, I didn't even see that. Right. And what you then do is you prepare the next game. So you know full well, or you get the clipping, Yeah. You walk on the field. I can remember having the semi-final of the FA Cup, Wimbledon playing. And I think they won the game. But I remember going through and I said to Vinnie Jones, can you tell Larry that I'm not going to accept the ones off the ball? And so they suddenly went, yeah, okay, fine. You're alive to it. Yeah.
What about the best player to watch up close?
Well, the sadness of my career was that I only refereed George Best once, and that was at Fulham. And it was an horrible day. And he was playing for Fulham against Stoke. And after 25 minutes, I'd blown for a free kick. He'd been fouled, as he normally was, because he was always in possession of the ball. And he says to me, how long to go, ref? And I've gone, we've already been playing 25 minutes. Blow the whistle, let's get off. The weather's awful. But he then played brilliantly. So, one of the players I really liked was Kenny Dalglish. And the reason I liked Dalglish was 100%. Every game. Every game I refereed Kenny Dalglish, 100%. and he would tell you, and he would moan. He wasn't happy. But for me, I knew that it wasn't at me directly. It was. I just want to win. And I was fortunate enough to referee John Charles' testimonial. Bobby Collins and John Charles shared a testimonial. And Dalglish was invited to play for Leeds United. And we're 3 or 4 minutes from the end of the game. And Dalglish puts out a lovely ball to a young trainee player, I think, who'd come on to make the numbers up at Leeds. And the guy just let the ball run out. And I almost had to get in between Dalglish to save the young player, because Dalglish was so upset it was untrue that a pass that he'd made had just been ignored by the player in an idle fashion. So he was that type of player. He was, I mean, I haven't been to Anfield recently, but when I did under the PGMOL, it was always a warm greeting, a mutual respect, I think.
Good. A player, and I have this down, a player that you had to keep your eye on. Obviously, Lawrie Sanchez was up there. So, but what about sort of a hard player that you'd have to keep your eye out for in a game, and how would you deal with that player?
I think that sometimes, let me give you an example. You can have someone like Paul Gascoigne, who can put in horrendous challenges, as he did in the cup final and got away with it.
Yeah.
So it's that unpredictable element that's there with that. So if he was going to be substituted, if he was not in the team but on the bench, you knew that was going to be a problem. And so you would have to meet him before he comes on. You'd meet him, run alongside him, and say, "Hey, can't understand. Get away. Your manager not picking you, Paul. What's he on about then?" I mean, he's such a good player as you. Look, got the family in the stand, come to watch you, not me. Just behave. And so, in a way, you're using some street craft to win over a player. And it's that street craft sometimes that you say to young referees, look, you've got to know your players, and you've got to know how to deal with them. There are some players in the game that you couldn't get anywhere near, Horton of Luton that I've already mentioned. You knew full well that if you were in his zone, he'd be telling you how to referee every minute of the game. And he'd undermine you. He'd attempt to undermine you. And he was the same when he was a manager or assistant manager at all. He'd want to undermine you. He just didn't get on with referees, no matter who you were, And then you've got people like Neil Warnock, who I used to get on quite famously, but there were times when we didn't see eye to eye. And as a result, I respected his view and chose to disagree. He only annoyed me really once when I was refereeing at Scarborough, and he'd just taken over as the boss. He'd moved from Burton Albion, become the Scarborough manager. And he shouted from the touchline, "You're coasting, ref. You've got a white badge and you're trying to win the game. And we haven't come to watch you, referee. We've come to watch the players," sort of thing. So that really annoyed me, particularly when a few months earlier I'd had a call from him to say, would I do a talk at his testimonial dinner with Fred Truman, the cricketer. And leading up to that, he left Burton Albion to join Scarborough and upset Burton Albion. So I get a call from Freddie Truman one evening, and Freddie Truman was like a god in cricket and a Yorkshireman as well. And he comes on. I understand you're the guy that's going to be talking with me at testimonial for Neil Warnock, but I see he's left, so it can't be going ahead. And eventually we get to say that it's going ahead, And Warnock didn't put a show in, so we did this testimonial dinner for Neil Warnock at Burton Albion, and he was the Scarborough manager, and I was always bemused by that. But, that's a privilege.
You've obviously bumped into many a manager. I'll ask you about Brian Clough, because Brian Clough, just everyone loved the idea of Brian Clough. What was he like to deal with, and what managers did you find hard to deal with, and what ones were, always comfortable and maybe made friends with?
Clough was brilliant. You knew full well that he wanted his players to get on with playing the game and not get involved with the referee at all. And I got a call very early in my career from Nottingham Forest to say, would I be prepared to referee a pre-season Nottingham Forest versus Tampa Bay Rowdies? At that time, the arrangement was that if a friendly was being played in Sheffield, then a Sheffield referee would referee it, in Nottingham, a Nottingham referee. And there was a well-known Nottingham referee that I said, well, I can't because it's a Nottingham referee. No. Mr. Clough would really like you to come and referee this match. And so I met Peter Taylor before the game, 18,000 fans in to watch the game. And Taylor came in and said, look, Keith, Mr. Clough don't want any red cards. And I've gone, whoa, just a minute. You can't tell me how to referee. That's the first thing. I said, but I'm sure, because this is a pre-season friendly, I'm in agreement that we can avoid red cards. And it's dead simple. There is a way to do that. You be quick enough to sub them before I produce the red card. And he came back, knocked on the door. He said, yeah, he understands that. But what he's decided is this. If any player is giving you a bit of jip, look in his direction and he'll sub him immediately. So I blow the whistle, we start the game, and Larry Lloyd, number 5, sticks in a foul on this young Tampa Bay player, Rowdy's player. He's as good as kicked him in the air. It's a bit heavier than a foul. It's a yellow card at least. And so I've gone up to give him a bit of a rollicking and saying, look, we're only a few minutes. I know what's going off here, and I'm not going to allow it. And I hear Clough shouting, Larry, 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 from the touchline. And of course, I've looked towards the touchline, and Clough immediately, slightly flustered, goes to Larry Lloyd, come off. So Larry Lloyd's taken off after about 3 or 4 minutes. Some years later, I'm refereeing Wigan Athletic. Larry Lloyd's the manager. And as I arrived, the secretary of the club, a woman, said to me, Larry Lloyd wants to see you upstairs. And I go, well, just a minute. I don't know what it's about, but I'm bringing a linesman with me. I said, I can't be seen to be seeing a manager privately before the game. And so the guy goes up, and Larry Lloyd said to me, tell me why you sent me off. And I didn't tell you off. Yes, you did. Brian Clough said you sent me off. I go, no, I didn't. This is the arrangement. When the other story about Clough was this. Nigel Clough told me this story, right? So Kenny Burns had asked for an increase in salary, and Brian Clough wouldn't stick. He wouldn't give him a raise. And he's gone, no, absolutely not. You're not getting anyone. So as a result, they parted company. Burns left. And shortly afterwards, Forest have played in London, and they've stopped off at a service station near Nottingham. And Clough's in the coach. Nigel and a few players have gone to the toilet. As they come out, there is Kenny Burns. And they're asking what Kenny Burns is doing. And Kenny Burns is the manager of Boston in the Midland League, not Boston United, the other team in the Midland League. So they then go back to the coach, and Burns is going to the 12-seater van that's carrying the team, his team. So Nigel says to his dad, boss, just bumped into Kenny Burns. He goes, what? He said, Kenny Burns. The Kenny Burns. So he then gets off the coach, right, and says to the players, get off the coach. So they all get off the coach. They all go to this 12-seater van. And he's gone, Mr. Burns, come out. Mr. Burns, come out. So Kenny Burns comes out and he goes, right, Mr. Burns. He said, what are you doing now? He said, well, I'm manager of Boston. He said, yeah. Look at these players, he said. Right, he said, now let me tell you this. Kenny Burns, Scottish international, came to Nottingham Forest. He was a bit of a clogger. And he turned out to be one of the finest centre-halves in the game. He came and knocked on my door and wanted a few quid more than I was prepared to pay him. We split company. Now, there's a warning. Kenny Burns is now on a 12-seater bus, eating fish and chips, going nowhere, and you are sat on a 45-seat luxury coach, right? You've had a meal on the way from the game. Kenny Burns, did you make the right decision? I think not. And got back off the coach. And so Clough was a one-off. I mean, he was coming towards the end of his life and he was struggling and suffering. And I was the PGMOL boss and I was at Nottingham Forest watching a young referee. I sat there on my own and I looked across and he was pretty gaunt and I got this sort of come across and I sat alongside him and the warmth in his handshake and he just said, you weren't a bad referee, Keith. You weren't a bad referee. And for me, coming from him, that was a real sort of special thing. But there are others. Bob Paisley, Bill Shankly. I refereed at Workington. And it's an awful long way from Sheffield. And I stayed in Kendal overnight and then drove. And I was at the ground for 10 o'clock. And the groundsman greeted me. The pitch was in perfect condition at Workington. And we get into a chat. We've had a long conversation. And then the groundsman says to me, look, come and have a look at this tractor of mine. And it's a grey tractor, Ford, I think it was. And he said, Bill Shankly bought this tractor when he was manager here. I didn't even know he was a manager at Workington. Didn't even know he was there. And he goes, I know, Mr. Hackett, next week you've got a bigger game than the one today. And I've gone, today's is a big game for me. He goes, no, you're at Anfield next week. And I want you to do me a favour. Find out Mr. Shankly and tell him the tractor's doing okay. So I've gone I refereed the football match. The following week, referees used to go in the players' lounge. There are no players there, by the way, to have a cup of tea and a sandwich before the match. So I'm sat there. Shankly comes in and says, good afternoon. Very, very civil, very correct sort of guy. Mr. Hackett, yes. You're the referee today? Yes. He said, you were at Workington last week. I said, I was. And what about the groundsman? I said, what about the ground? I said, it's immaculate. What about the groundsman? Wonderful guy. And I knew his name then. I can't remember his name. And he goes, and what about my tractor? So here I am about to referee Liverpool against Wolverhampton Wanderers. And Bill Shankly's talking to me about this tractor at Workington. And the two linesmen are absolutely gobsmacked. I mean, they're looking at me as though I've come off a planet. But it shows, in a way, that we're all human.
Yeah, and football at every and any level is the same, no matter what. Everyone just loves the game. Absolutely.
I mean, I went to, I refereed at Sunderland, Manchester United, very, very early on in my career. And to referee Manchester United in literally my first season was incredible. And I refereed the game and come into the dressing room after the match, and Manchester United lost 1-0. And I switched the radio on because we were listening for the results. And they go, we're going to Roker Park to interview Tommy Docherty. And I'm listening now really intently. And the interview guy says, I think it was Desmond Lynham, says, well, Mr. Tommy, I'm sure you've had a great game at Sunderland, but I noticed you've lost. And he goes, yeah, disappointing result in one way, but, my son Mick plays for Sunderland. He's on the winning team. His mother will be really happy. Clearly, I'm not. He said, but I just want to point out the young referee's I think the young referee, I've not seen him before, he's had a terrific match. And he's the star of the game. And I was absolutely gobsmacked. And, a few people came in, I got changed. And I came out into the car park area of the old Roker Park. And as I'm walking across, a youngster came up to me and said, Ref, can I have your autograph? I've gone, but I'm the referee's son. I know. I want your autograph. And nobody asked me for my autograph before. So I start signing this piece of paper, pretty big. Best wishes, Keith Hackett. I handed him back. He looked at it, tore it, shredded it, and threw it in the air and said, my dad says you're rubbish. That's football. That's football.
Listen, Keith, we could probably talk for another couple of hours, and I'd love to. I think we have to go on our way. Thanks very much for your time. Listen, there's been serious issues, and there's been those fond memories. Listen, we'll probably get you on back again some other time. Football, referees, laws, the game. It's also intertwined at the moment that there's going to be so much going on that opinions are well needed. But listen, thanks so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye.